Howdy y'all, you got the Bulldog on the channel. We got Mitzy down here. Hadn't really planned on doing this today, but everything just kind of worked out. I needed her up here yesterday to move a piece of playground equipment. And then my boss's vehicle had a problem that it's not a really hard job, but in a couple, 3 places, it is really nice to have 2 people. So I decided I was just gonna come back down here today. So I took his car home last night, brought it back so that Mitzy would already be down here. And we're going to change out the parts that have been broken since, well, grunge wasn't even a thing when these things broke. That's how long this truck's been running like this. The steering rack is the part that I believe is broke. It is a Dorman part number 83211. And since it's been 30 years, we've lost the keys to it. So it's going to get a new lock cylinder, part number LC14260. And the turn signal cancel springs, I guess, are either broke or missing. So I went ahead and picked up a set of them. Part number 49312. Hopefully that's focused. All that is to, fix the redneck anti-theft, the one that prevents dumb people from stealing it. We're going to put it back to stock. That way I can at least pull the keys. So let's start diving into this. I will show you the problem if your turn signal doesn't cancel whenever you turn your wheel back and forth. The cause of the floppy steering column that a lot of these tilt column GMs have, as well as how to change a lock cylinder. And the original issue, the steering rack. This is what this is called. It allows the steering column to rotate up and down for the tilt wheel and still have a linear in and out movement for the ignition, because the ignition switch on these things is clear down here behind the dash on top of the steering column. So you have to translate the rotating movement from the lock cylinder down there among a rod. We had an extra rod sitting around, so whenever that rack broke, Dad just took the ignition switch, picked it up off of the rod that was in there, shoved it off to one side, stuck another rod down in there and put it back down there, and then bent a loop on the top so that we could start it, and then we never fixed it. There's also some other things that have happened in here that we've eliminated. The turn signal lever came loose and it's still starting to get a little loose again, but the screw backed out and got caught in the lock plate that locks your steering wheel. So he took the steering wheel off and got rid of that lock plate too. And that doesn't hurt my feelings any. I won't be searching for another one to put it back. But we're gonna go into this and get all these parts put in here, and hopefully that rack is what's wrong with it. Okay, first we start by removing the horn button. And as you can see, it doesn't work because it quit years ago, and we relocated the horn to over here on the dash. Yeah, 3 Phillips screws to pull it out. That gives you access to the bolts to pull it from underneath. And I got the wrong size socket. Just get you a visual of what it looks like in here. This here is 7/8, I believe. It shouldn't come off that hard, but this thing has been removed improperly a few times. There's a couple different ways to remove this steering wheel. The way I'm going to do it right now is the right way with the correct puller. The other way is to put the nut on there a little bit, get your knees up underneath the steering wheel, pull on the top, and smack that center with a hammer until it pops loose. That's been done that way several times, and now everything's kind of messed up. So we're going to do it the right way since we have the right tools. First off, you get you a pick and you pull this horn plate out of here. Now you see those holes on each side of the steering wheel, they're threaded, and you put a puller on that. This is the snap-on kit. My boss had it before I started working here, so it's plenty old. You can get cheap ones, but honestly, if you're going to do it all the time, you need the good ones. There's different types of threads, so check your threads. I think these are the fine threads. Can't hardly see down in the holes. No, they're the coarse thread. Yeah, there we go. You set the thing across there, start your bolts. One too much. Goes real easy with the right tools. The older ones you need to mark. I don't bother on this because it is what it is. Oh, okay. Yeah. I've got one cancel spring that's still here and one that's gone, but the reason that it doesn't work is because the piece that makes it work is missing when Dad pulled out that lock plate that's supposed to go right here. And as you can see, this lever, you know, it's loose because it's broken. We're not going to worry about that today. I'm going to go about back and see if I can find a new piece to go in here. There's no shortage of them that have the horn button broke out of them. So maybe we'll have one. That'll get me my cancel spring back. Normally there would be a lock plate over top of this, and it's got clips down here that hold it in, but you know, that's all gone now, so we don't need to utilize the lock plate removal function of this set over here. Normally you would have to screw one of these down over top of the stud here and compress this spring to pull a clip out, but I wasn't privy to what all he did in here. This is the first time I've had it apart. Now let's missing a screw out of the turn signal there. That one's there and that one's there. Okay. I don't know. I don't think the 4-ways work, but I'm not 100% sure. He hated that knob, so he always ripped the knob off of it. I don't know why, but he did. So I'm going to pull this lever off. I need to remove my Band-Aid adhesion tool. And we're going to pull out the turn signal switch. We're going to just pull it back and let it hang down. And then I'll show you what we've got when we get in there. There's supposed to be 3 screws. When I go back, I'll find another one to put in this hole. First, we got to take off this lever. The reason he took that lock plate out is because this screw backed out and got caught in the lock plate going down the road and locked the steering wheel up. So he made that go away. That's nice. When your screwdrivers become magnetized just enough to pick the screw up out of the hole but not hold it, so that you can drop it and lose it. All right, it will not come out of there without that hazard switch screw out, so we got that out of there. Now, there's just enough slack if you pull up on the wires to get this out of the way. And there went my other screw. Gravity. Now, I had talked about the floppy steering column, that screw there, and there's a third screw. Oh, it's underneath that cobweb. Yeah, this truck gets used all the time. Oh, there is no screw there. Alright, it's time for a sicko scavenger hunt. These 3 screws like to get loose, and that's why your steering column will wiggle around. And yes, it'll get loose because there's one missing. How did it come out without wiggling? I don't know. This is going to be a little bit fun, maybe. Like I say, I don't have a key for this. But there's really not much to these. There's supposed to be a key in buzzer thing that goes in here. That's not there. Okay, I'll come back when I figure this out. Okay, usually these Chevrolets have a pin that sticks down through here to hold the lock cylinder in. This one has, it looks like a tab that you have to depress. And usually when they have a button you need to depress, it's only whenever the key is in the run position. I'm gonna see if I can get this out of there. I depressed into this slot here and got the lock cylinder to pop out. Yeah, we used to have the key for it. I don't know where it is now, but that clip right there, and it just, yeah, I don't know how much is any good in this. That's why I got, you know, everything I thought I would need. There's part of it. Well, maybe it was just the lock cylinder that broke. Okay, well, I'm going to check that rod down underneath there and see if rotating this flat makes the rod go up and down. See how stiff it is. I don't know if my pliers will get in there or not. Yeah, they won't. I'm going to get some needle nose and see. I've got the column dropped down a little bit to make this job a little bit easier. I've located the old rod that's still here. It was bent a little bit, but I tried to straighten it up. I might have to go a little bit more to straighten it up, but here's the ignition switch. I know you can't see it very well, but there is a spot underneath of it. There, I got it pulled down out of there. Oh, there we go. That hole right there, this thing slides back and forth in this groove, and that is your ignition switch. All the way up is sprung, and that's a start position clear back here. Then you have run, off, lock, and then accessories. So I'm gonna put this rod in here after I get it straightened up perfectly straight. He just bent it down out of the way so that he could get it away so he could put that other rod in here. Now this rod here is what translates the rotational movement of your lock cylinder to a linear movement of your ignition switch down here. When you rotate your lock cylinder, it pulls on the bottom of it's hooked to basically the bottom of the lock cylinder. And as you rotate your lock cylinder forward, it pulls up on this rod to start the truck. I have to think about this whenever I'm doing work to this truck. The last guy to mess with this end and be underneath this dash was my dad. I had a guy stop me on the road the other day and ask me, how much would you take for this truck? I told him, you don't have enough. Or, you don't know how much I got. I told him, it doesn't matter. This was Dad's truck, and it's gonna stay around. We're gonna keep fixing this thing until it dies or we die. And if it dies, I'm gonna resurrect it, and we're gonna keep driving it. Okay, I've got the ignition lock cylinder in here. I got the switch back on and adjusted down here. There are slots, so you're gonna have to play with it a little bit to adjust it back and forth. I take the column loose and get it down a little bit. This doesn't work anyway, so it doesn't matter if the cable breaks. But now So we have a functional lock cylinder again, where we can pull the keys. I am going to try to shoot some lubricant down in here and get onto that rack, because it is dragging a little bit. Not bad, but a little bit. I'm going to try to get some lubricant down on there, and then we're going to put them back together. Okay, I chose some of this WD-40 white lithium grease because it was there, and I shot it down in this hole up here, down here, around the gear, down through here, and up through this hole right here, because the gears are sitting right about here. It has a gear on the back side of this lock cylinder, and it rotates into that steering rack right here. I call it a steering rack. It's an ignition rack, and it, as you rotate, that deal has a loop on the end of it, as I showed you earlier, and it pushes up and down, and it translates the articulation right here on the tilt wheel. But now, nice and easy. I was worried about that. I wanted to check that before I didn't take apart this piece right here, because if this was really stiff and I couldn't get it freed up, then I had to go in here and at least lubricate that ignition rack. Now we're going to find a bolt for this, because that one's missing down there, and then we got to find a bolt for the, or a screw for the turn signal switch, because it's missing one, and then we're going to try to go back together. Wish me luck. Going through a box of stuff back there, I did find the piece that's supposed to cancel your turn signal, and as usual, the horn stalk is broken off. There's supposed to be a tube that's bolted here. It sticks up about that far, comes through the steering wheel and lock plate and everything for the horn wire to go down through it. But my horn's on the dash, so I don't need that. But here's the little bumps. As you rotate the wheel, the bump makes the turn signal shut itself off. So when you turn to the right, and then when you come back to the left, the bump turns off the right turn signal. And you turn it to the left, and it comes back to the right, and this bump turns off the right turn signal, the left turn signal. So that's how these things work. I found the other cancel spring down there in the column. I'm going to put the new ones on anyway, probably, maybe. No, I'll just put the old one back on because they're not broken. So I'll send the new ones back along with that steering rack. But I'm going to find a way to attach this to the steering wheel, because this is what made it turn. There's no gear or anything in here. So I'm going to try to find that right now. Okay, this is the mess that I made. I had to have some washers underneath here to bush this down a little bit, since I don't have a locking plate anymore. And I found one of these cancel cams that had already been broken right here. That's why it was not in use. And I just ground a machine screw so it could stand up halfway straight. Yeah, that's straight. And put a nut in it, because, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. The only worry is that this head will hit on the spot where the contact patch in the turn signal is supposed to be for the horn. It's not there anymore, but the stalk is still there. I don't think it's going to get that close though. We'll get this set in here. It just has to hold it into this hole so that the cam will turn with the steering wheel and not scoot. It'd be tight enough that it wouldn't try to scoot all the time, but sometimes it might try to scoot a little bit. And I have to have these bushings, because sitting on there, this doesn't touch the center, and it needs to touch. So now, okay, there we go. We're gonna set all this on there and screw it down. The steering wheel will tighten up against the taper. This is just to put preload against the spring and the bearing that is in there. Before I put this back on, I'm going to work on this with a file a little bit. Like I say, it's been boogered. The mushroom on the end of this keeping me from getting the nut started straight. Okay, it's starting straight. Now, run this down a little bit by hand before I send it. Okay. If my steering wheel's not straight, I'll have to redo this. Oh, my screw doesn't hit. Cancels that way. Cancels that way. Cool. All right. This is an isolator that's supposed to go in here. It doesn't need it anymore because there's no horn, but oh well. Just center it. Now, there's a notch. It goes on the top. The only reason I'm even putting this back in is so that the button will go back in there and look good. A lot of them it's missing anyway. Bulldog has a rally wheel on it because what does a high schooler in the 90s do when he has a square body Chevy? Well, if he's got two tins to rub together, he goes and gets a rally wheel and puts on his truck. And that's what I did. Plus, it did not have a tilt wheel in it. And I'm a big guy, so I needed a steering wheel that was just a little bit smaller. And I don't have a problem with Armstrong in it. Now that I've been talking, I forgot to tighten these things. Okay, notch on top, click. All right, we're back together. Now, the only thing that I have a worry about is whether or not the steering wheel vision is straight. It's not locked like it is on the modern ones. Some of them, a little bit later than this, had a spline that you couldn't put it but one place. Yeah, I like them a little bit better. But this takes care of a problem that has been on this truck for 30 years, and I cannot believe that we didn't have to go deep into this thing. I'll show you some pieces here that explain, you know, what I was talking about. Here we have an assortment of parts that I dug up. Since we're not going to go deep into this column of mine, I'm just going to show you on these parts what I'm talking about. This is the part here where the turn signal goes down into. This is not just like my column. This is a more modern, in the 90s probably. But I'll have to show you here. This actually sets like this. And this is mounted on the end of the steering column, and this part goes down over top of it. And goes down on there like this. This is your tilt wheel lock. But the way these things work is it has a pin like this that presses into the side here, and it presses in flush. You can use a screw and a claw hammer to get this out, but if you break the screw off in here, you're screwed. This is a very cheap little puller tool. Screws down in the end of this. Gravity. I have to check the gravity on every video. This bolt, this nut here on the back side, pulls down on there and presses this thing out. Makes it really easy. And that will pull this thing off of there where you can tighten these screws up. These screws like to get loose. And on that type of column, these 3 screws like to get loose. But we have this rack here, and it slides down through somewhere. Here we go. It's clear over on this side. You have a cam gear, a toothed gear right here. If I can get it up in there. And that's how it works. When you rotate your lock cylinder right here, it pulls this back and forth. Had this rod right here that's bent in a loop now, but when it was straight, it set alongside here, and that notch popped right out into this. And I think there was another piece that went in here that held everything straight, but that allowed this rod to stick out straight. We'll use this end, basically like this, but much shorter stop. And as you tilted the wheel up and down, that stayed straight. And this gets all gummed up with old grease and dirt and everything, and gets hard to turn. And this rack, being pot metal, likes to break. This one is in good shape. They will also wear out. So I might end up having to do that on this truck eventually, but not today. And here is another ignition switch. You can see a little bit better now. It bolts to the column like this, with the column right here. This rod clips into it like that, and it bolts down. And that's how your ignition switch works. I don't know how many videos around on YouTube are about this particular thing. I can imagine there's several, but you kind of redneck this thing together, which is something I used to do all the time. I'll never do this to a customer vehicle, but I know what I've done to my own, so we'll do it this way. Like, comment, subscribe, hit your little bell notification, share it all around. We'll talk to you later.